Coming up on Plane Crazy Down Under, we're heading up above the flight levels and checking out some amazing advances in technology with the crew from the Monash High Powered Rocketry team.
We make an ABS print and we fill it in with this paraffin wax, and then we feed in nitrous oxide and we combust those and burn through that motor. So it essentially allows us to make our engine reusable.
And Robert Brand from Australian company Flight Design shows us how high-altitude balloons hold the key to modern, affordable surveillance platforms and much more.
So we can actually put these things on balloons and power them and get them up there, and we tend to do that mass-wise for under 4 kilograms, or if we have to, under 6 kilograms.
We're aiming for the Stratosphere this week, that's for sure, as we get plane crazy.
Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome back to Plane Crazy Down Under, the show where we like to talk about aviation right here in Australia and, of course, around this part of the world. It's 2025, Grant. Boy, time does fly.
I know, right? And time has flown a lot between our last episode and now, which was released in the middle of October. Life gets in the way along other things, but hey, we can, by getting this episode out, we can still say that we're Australia's longest running aviation podcast. We just have gaps here and there.
Yeah, I'll take that. There's details, Grant. Great details. Anyway, welcome to the show, folks. I'm Steve Vischer. I'm here with Grant McHerron, of course, my longtime partner. I think this would be year number 16, I think we're going into since we first started this. And, of course, 2025, Grant, is, there's a couple of things that are coming up that I think will be of interest from an aviation standpoint. Of course, it's an Avalon year, so we're planning already to get there and collect some content there. It's also an election year coming up, and we've just been talking about this in the pre-show, if you want to call it that, about how we might tackle that, because I think back – I can't think how many elections ago that was, Grant, but we did do an election special, back in that time where we got some politicians from all sides of the political spectrum in to talk about their plans or their thoughts on what they might be able to do for aviation, and I think particularly general aviation, which I don't think it's any surprise to anyone who's a regular listener that that's sometimes a sector that gets a bit politically forgotten. So maybe we might tackle that this year too.
Yeah, well, it's been since 2013 that we last did an election special episode.
2013, there you go. Crikey.
Yeah, 12 years. Woohoo! So
back when we were famous.
I know, right? back when we used to spend a lot of time telling people what a podcast actually is. Hey.
Yeah. Well, you certainly don't have to do that these days. Times really have changed that way. It's encouraging. Might have taken a little bit longer than we'd hoped, but here we are.
Yeah, we're still here, still going. Oh my God, we took a little break. We got distracted, but there's been a lot of stuff going on in the last 3 months. I'll just talk about that. I won't talk about the whole time since 2009. But yeah, look, we're here. We've got a couple of really good discussions, and it's all about altitude, isn't it?
Yes, I think we said at the end of the last one, this one would be rocketing its way to you. I think the rocket might have spluttered a little bit. It's rocketed here. And, we are going to be talking to the team from the Monash University High Powered Rocketry team, a vast array of people that joined us on the call for that. Grant, I hope you've got the list there of people. It was a really fascinating discussion. And you'll hear me say at the end of it, really encouraging too, because there's a lot of very young people there that are very, very smart.
There certainly was, mate. It's great to be associated with these folks, and really do enjoy catching up with them. It was great to catch up with Megan, Oliver, and Redmond, but also big thanks to Rachel, who helped put it all together from that team. It was a wonderful discussion about what they're doing and the types of rockets they're building, the altitudes they're getting, and that was really great. And like you said, so dynamic. And great to see that the future is in good hands with some young engineers.
And speaking of high altitude, Grant, ahead in the second half of the show, we're going to be talking to Robert Brand. Robert is another very, very smart individual who's doing some things, speaking of high altitude, Grant, that are of particular interest for you, I think, with your background in ballooning, but taking that to all sorts of new technology levels. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's referred to as HAB, but it's not hot air ballooning like I play with. No, it's high altitude balloons. And there's a lot going on there. In fact, I'm writing an article based on this discussion and a number of bits of research I've been doing recently that'll be coming out in Australian Defence magazine about, and should probably come out just after this comes out, about the military uses and importance of high altitude balloons for surveillance and targeting and things like that. The Americans are doing a lot with it. It's great to see that we've got a local homegrown company working with universities, working with defence, getting persistent sensors up there for way less than it costs to stick up a satellite.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the thing is too, all of these things always sort of start, I think, with the defence background, which, some people are in favour of and some people might think is unfortunate. The reality is that that's where the technology seems to develop in all these sorts of things. We've seen it with drones, for example, and obviously over time that flows into civilian uses, which is a good thing for everybody.
Certainly is, Steve, but I reckon we stop leaving everyone hanging and we get straight on to the good stuff.
Hanging, I see what you did there, Grant. And we're not talking about that this week.
Well, segues are us.
It's great to be back. Let's get into it. It's going to be a fun episode.
And may the dad jokes flow.
Monash HPR team, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Now, we've got a lot of people on board on the show today. Thanks for joining us. We're going to start with you, Megan. We've been nominated before we started recording as the person who'll tell us all about the Monash rocket program, and it's a fascinating one. Can you tell us a bit about it?
So we were a student team formed in 2018 by a small group of students from Monash University. A lot of us study engineering, but some of us study business and other science degrees. And since 2018, we've grown to over 100 members, and we design and build rockets, essentially, for different competitions.
And you do that at Monash University here in Melbourne. Now, where are these rockets constructed? Where are they put together? Do you do that on campus, or is there an engineering firm that helps you out with that, or how does that work?
So we design and build all of our airframes in-house, and all of our hybrid motors are designed and built within Monash University as well. And then we launch them out at Serpentine for test flights, which is about 3 hours north of Melbourne. And then we compete in various competitions. So the Australian Universities Rocketry Competition, which happens in Australia, and Spaceport America Cup, which is over in America every year.
Now, these aren't small rockets. These aren't just going up a few hundred feet or, let's see if we can get to it. You're talking 10 to 30,000 feet and more, aren't you?
Yeah. So in the past, we've competed in both of these categories, 10,000 and 30,000 feet.
Okay, I see on the webcam feed that we've got here that we've got someone there standing behind a screen there with what looks to be a mock-up of the rocket. Can you tell us a bit about the size of it, dimensions, and some of the figures about that?
Yeah, so the rocket behind me here is Hyperion. It's a 3-metre rocket, roughly 6-inch diameter, flew to about 30,000 feet at the Australian Rocketry Competition in 2019, I believe it was. It's one of our first rockets that we ever flew, and yeah, it's been in the workshop ever since.
Tell us about some of the materials that go into constructing it. Obviously, I suppose part of the study of rocketry would be looking into suitable material, not only to go to a particular altitude, but also to withstand particular speeds and stresses, aerodynamic forces, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an extensive manufacturing of composites that we can do on campus. So we have wet layups, pre-preg layups of both fiberglass and carbon fiber, and we have sanding areas on campus where we can work with those materials, finish them off, and we can do all that manufacturing on campus. We have an extensive machining house on campus as well. That we have student machinists, people who operate manual machines, CNC, lathes, and so we manufacture pretty much everything on campus. The only thing that on our most recent rocket that we've outsourced is some welds on our engine because we weren't comfortable welding aluminium, but everything else is done by us. And as far as like material science, absolutely. We simulate all our materials to withstand stresses. We get upwards of 20 Gs at launch and sometimes up to 40 Gs on violent decelerations from parachute deployment and that sort of stuff.
So you mentioned aluminium there. Is that a major component of your particular rocket?
Absolutely. So the entire engine is essentially built from the ground up from aluminium. There's some cast aluminium parts, but most of it is machined aluminium, and it's all anodized in a lovely gold color at a local firm called MRC Industries. They do that for us, so it's really good. But all our structural components inside, including bulkheads and stuff, which is just things that we connect parts to and take structural loading, it's all aluminium, and it's all designed by us, optimized by us, and machined by us as well.
You mentioned motors, engines, that kind of thing. I'm guessing you don't have very small turbo pumps and liquid cooled and all the other things that make life a lot of fun. Are you solid fuel all the way? And if so, are they commercial purchased or you make them yourself?
In the past, we've used solid rocket motors, but now moving into our most innovative project yet, Project Zenith, we've manufactured, designed, built in-house our own hybrid rocket motor called Solaris.
And when you say hybrid, what does that mean?
So that means we have a liquid oxidizer and a solid fuel. And so essentially we make an ABS print and we fill it in with this paraffin wax. And then we feed in nitrous oxide and we combust those and burn through that motor. So it essentially allows us to make our engine reusable.
Yeah, on that reusability front as well, there's a lot of issues with getting engines here in Australia. They've just changed the laws over in the States, the export laws. We actually can't get any large solid motors anymore. So we're right on the cusp of developing some really serious, or we have developed some serious, seriously powerful engines here in Australia. And this just allows us to launch whenever and wherever we want, essentially.
So really effectively, the Americans, by imposing that ban, have actually done you a favour because it's forced you to look in different directions, which is really, I suppose, something that science and research like this is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. We're one of the first student teams to have started looking into hybrids before this ban. So we are a bit ahead of some of the other student teams in Australia, but it's good to see other rocketry teams within Australia working on hybrids now. We did have our first launch of Zenith a few weeks ago now. And it became the most powerful student researched and developed hybrid motor in Australia. It was really cool to see, and I think it is much more innovative than using a solid fuel grain anyway.
Yeah, and just on that note, just over a month ago, that launch happened now, and we're capable of launching it again right in that short period of time. And we're allowed to do that for a few $100s. That's what the solid motor the hybrid motor does for us, is it allows us to be able to launch that same day, right? Like it gives us that cost benefit of not having to spend thousands of dollars on a rocket motor, just being able to pretty much throw in a new fuel grain, refill and send it up again.
So the paraffin part is the piece that you'd swap out and swap something new in and off you go again.
Yeah, and then refill the tank. But yeah. Essentially, yes. It's not like we're shoving a whole new motor in. And for reference, like the past motors that we've used, like the solid motors for competitions, they've cost around $3,000. So we are saving money and being more innovative. So it's a win-win situation, really.
Because I think in the original form of rocketry and rocket science, if we go back historically, that was a real issue. If you think of efficiencies, wasn't it? I mean, you would use any particular part of that launch system once and then you couldn't use it again. But we've certainly seen in more recent years, and we're talking obviously heavy lift rockets here, but I suppose the concept is the same, where people are looking at reusable, and now we look with all rapt attention at videos of what they're doing at SpaceX with their being able to land rockets back on the ground and reuse them. It's amazing. Yeah,
absolutely. Like space is becoming more sustainable and reusable in general, and it's really great that our team can be a part of that as well.
Yeah, whatever we can do to reduce the price to orbit for every kilo, that's a wonderful thing.
A big driving cost reduction as well is our sponsors as well, because we get all our aluminium for free through Capital, and also like we get free ABS, free ABS material, and our sponsors allow us to drive those costs down as well. And also the university, by allowing us to essentially machine everything in-house instead of paying a machinist we're not paying those costs that you get from a commercial product.
I think you mentioned at the top there that there was also not only people from the scientific part of this, but there's also people who are studying business. I suppose that's a good example there, isn't it, of how all of these sorts of different facets all blend in together to bring the one outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Our business team does a great job. They handle our sponsorships and they put out our media for us. They're constantly in contact with people to try and help push us forward and get our outreach out there. And we constantly, quite frequently, perform these outreaches. We go to primary schools, high schools, and we do little events where we launch paper rockets, bottle rockets, things of all those sorts, just to kind of spread awareness of our team, for one, and number two, to really push for that growth of STEM in schools, because the work we do is amazing. We really want to showcase it, and we really want other people to understand what they can do if they can get out there and put in the hard yards.
Now, you mentioned that this team is operating here at Monash, but you did mention other teams. I mean, how many other teams are there, say, around Australia that are doing this type of work?
From the top of my head, maybe 10. I could be wrong. All around Australia, there's quite a few in Queensland, some in WA, some in New South Wales, and then RMIT in Melbourne within Victoria as well, a part of these competitions.
So we've got some local competition at RMIT, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
And Melbourne University as well.
And Melbourne Uni, yeah.
And Melbourne Uni, never heard of them. Anyway.
So you've got these rockets. They're going to 10, 30,000 feet. What kind of payloads do you have on them, and what kind of supporting equipment, software, all that kind of stuff do you need to actually do all this design, build, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, as we've talked about, we've got two main projects running at the moment. We have our Project Zenith and our Project Wyvern. On our Project Wyvern, we're essentially doing an experiment where we track the distortion of your vision during high acceleration. So as the rocket takes off, we have a camera in there, and it's pointed at some grid lines, and it uses an ocular lens, and when it experiences high acceleration, that lens gets distorted, and they kind of map it to this grid on the paper to, essentially see how your vision would change under these high loads.
And do the payloads stay around all the way to the top?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you're talking about this type of telemetry, how is that managed? How do you send that down? What sort of data links do you have? How is that all managed?
So typically we have quite a few redundant radio systems on board. We have things like RFD 900s on board that send basically accelerometer data, gyro data, and GPS data directly to our ground station so we can track it in real time. We also have a live camera feed as well from within the avionics bay. As far as telemetry from the payloads, that's not something we currently implemented, but we still take a lot of data throughout flight.
So basically it's recording all the way up and then you retrieve that data once the rockets come back to Earth.
Absolutely. And
how do you track the rocket so you know where it's going, what height it reached, and where it winds up landing? Because, friends, the guy I used to work with in the 80s, he was part of a home rocket club, and they actually packed their own solid rocket fuel at home. It was, they'd blown up a few kitchens. But they said one day that there was a bit more wind than they expected, and it took them hours to try and find it. They thought they'd tracked where it landed just visually.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you doing?
Well, okay, so I actually love this question because it's actually partly my job on the day as well. So you have someone, you basically, there's a GPS on board and there's a GPS on the ground station. And I'm standing there holding a Yagi antenna and I point it at the rocket I have to try and track it in the air. So that gives us, real-time GPS coordinates, and then I have to track it on its way down under chutes. And then as it, sometimes disappears over the horizon, you get this last known location and then you can find it from there. And as far as the solid engine goes, they're unfortunately we're not allowed to make our own solid engines here in Australia. So
yeah, things have changed a bit in the last 40, 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what that means is you need some legal scholars from Monash to come on board so that you can start lobbying and effectively getting that overturned.
Yeah, we need to lobby the Australian Space Agency for that one, I think.
Okay, all right.
Well, I mean, speaking of legalistic stuff, how do you go getting permits to do all this sort of stuff when you want to go out and fly? I mean, obviously, I guess they've got to block out a big chunk of airspace so that you can go and do this.
So first of all, when we go to our testing, Monash Uni has been really good with the legal side of things for static firing our rocket motors, so just testing the motors without flying them. But in terms of actually testing our motors and flying them, we've got the Victorian Rocketry Association, which is a really great group of people that organise launches out in Serpentine, where any student teams or any hobby rocketry people in general can go fly rockets legally, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than just putting it up in my backyard, which happens to be, today close to Melbourne International Airport. Yeah, not a good look. Mm-hmm. But so you've already mentioned you're getting a few things for free, aluminium, stuff like that. And yes, for our American friends, aluminium, thank you very much.
That's exactly right.
But this isn't a cheap thing. You've got 3-4 meter rockets to take out, set up. You've got to have gantries, ground station, all the gear you've got to have. I imagine you're doing lots of simulations, all this kind of stuff. you've got to have sponsors. You hinted there were sponsors. Do you want to run us through who they are?
So our main sponsors that support us financially with cash and not just in-kind sponsorship, so like parts and materials and that sort of stuff, would be Fleet Space Technologies. You would also have Anchor. Fleet Space is a startup in the resources and space industry. They use satellites to find resource deposits on the ground. We also have Anchor, which is a local company that makes grinding machines for CNC. And then our largest sponsor is Moog, which makes control systems and that sort of stuff. And probably our largest sponsor is Monash University, who provides us with a lot of funding, as well as this amazing space that we use to design and build our rockets, and staff members on call, which once you add it all up, accounts for like hundreds of thousands of dollars every year.
Well, it's really great that you've got lots of corporate sponsorship there. I suppose a lot of your corporate sponsors would be looking at it and thinking, well, there's a lot of benefits for them potentially in the whatever technology you're developing there, whatever research you're doing, which is really it really goes to the heart of what university education is all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously, you mentioned since 2018, you obviously weren't there at the start in 2018. So you've had a number of students go through the program and be involved and so on. Then they've completed their studies, graduated, moved on to other things. So what kind of careers have alumni from HPR wound up in?
Yeah, a lot of space, not just in Australia, but also overseas. So one of our founders, Megan Munro, she works at Airbus in the UK, I think it is now. We've got a few people at Rocket Lab, Gilmour Space. Anyone else got any others? There's a lot of different places.
A lot of people work locally in resource and defense companies and consultancies as well. I think a lot, like when you look at the number of people who graduate in their degree and end up in engineering roles, I think it's like 12%. But looking at our numbers, I think is a bit higher than that. I think so.
We've got tangible results. You've got, because I note that you're using homegrown simulation software to check what the design's likely to do. So you've got that, you've got the machining, you've got the business side of things. What color should it be? Where do we put the sponsor logos? Everything there, it's all actually tangible. You've not just got a degree, you've actually got real world experience in the industry you want to go into, or that you then apply, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I think it gives everyone on a student team a bit of a leg up when they're applying for things if they've got a bit more experience than just being in the classroom. I know a lot of our sponsors, they offer grad roles specifically to student teams because they know that we've got a little bit more experience coming into industry. And so they always, offer us grad roles. Not just us, but it definitely does help in your application when you can say that you've done really cool things like this.
Yeah, you don't get this kind of experience everywhere. The amount of pride that we take in our work, and the amount of effort we put in to go through the process of design, build, it's really impressive, the amount of work that we do and the high standards we take.
That's excellent to hear. Now, Megan, Redmond, Oliver, you mentioned before the Spaceport America Cup. I note with interest that the next one's coming up in June of 2025. I assume that you've got that in your sights and you're planning to go and once again take it by storm?
We absolutely do. The last time we competed at Spaceport was 2023. So we've taken a 2-year design cycle to get to the 2025 Spaceport America Cup. And the idea is to bring our most innovative rocket to that competition and hopefully win it. So it'll include our hybrid rocket engine, an active control system, so air brakes, and a lot of custom PCBs that have been made by students on the team.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's great. And when you win those awards, we'd love to have you back on the show to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll let you know how it goes.
And even if you just go and have fun and come back, we still want to talk to you again, find out how it went, because this is amazing stuff. And I got to ask the question, right now the rockets go up, the parachutes come out, they all come back in one piece pretty much and all that kind of stuff. So how long until you're going to have them flying themselves back down, a la SpaceX and all the other guys?
Well, we've got a few final year projects, like capstone projects in the works right now. So we've got some thrust vector control things happening at the moment, turning into like monoprop engines that can be throttleable and sort of thrust vector controlled. Not quite at the landing stage yet, but check back in maybe 2-3 years and we'll be a bit closer to that.
Watch this space. Watch this space.
Exactly.
So our final year projects are run through the team, and they're quite well coordinated. Previously, we've had a thrust vector controlled FIP performed with the team, and they got to an interesting state. It got to a fun point where they could put a little motor in it, and you could see it kind of stabilize itself without the need for fins. But they've still been working on it in the background after they graduated. And so this weekend, they're hoping to put it up in the air again with a much bigger, better system than they designed in their final year. Megan herself is also participating in the continuation of that project, which will be kicking off next year, hopefully. So, yeah.
Very cool.
She's going to go to Rocket Lab and steal all their secrets and come back and teach us how it's done.
Just keep an eye on the helicopter retrieval. I really want to see that one work.
Well, guys, there's so much information that we could go into here. Your website is quite extensive and explains it in great detail, including all of your sponsors. Can you tell our listeners, if they want to check it out and find out more, where they can find you online?
So I guess our main website is monashhpr.com. But we're also on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of the socials.
All the cool pads, yeah.
Yeah.
This is what reminds old people like Grant and myself that we're dealing with very, very smart young people here.
who know what they're doing with social media and have time to do it and, know all the, Oh, and LinkedIn, yes. Yes, can't forget LinkedIn. Of course you'd be on LinkedIn. I mean, I can't believe you're actually hanging out on LinkedIn where us old farts sit as well.
Yeah, well, it is inspiring. It is inspiring to know that young people such as yourself are doing such really amazing and interesting and really, frankly, very important work. So more power to you. I wish you every success, and we would love to talk to you again in the future. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It's lovely.
Folks, we're about to play some promos for a few organizations, other podcasts, and various entities that we want to support, and we want to help out. We're not getting paid for these. We're doing them to help out.
Hi, I'm Dave Homewood from the Wings Over New Zealand show, New Zealand's own aviation podcast series, where we feature the stories of Kiwi pilots, warbird restorers, Air Force veterans, home builders, historians, authors, modelers, stories from aviation museums and associations, airshow reports, and much, much more. The Wings Over New Zealand show loves to bring you the stories of Kiwis who've made their mark on aviation. So find the Wings Over New Zealand show online. Find more about it on the world-famous Wings Over New Zealand Aviation Forum and like us on Facebook.
Keeping up to date with the latest news is a huge part of our daily lives. Now you can have news on demand with the Australian Independent Radio News app. News and sport in your pocket whenever you want it. Wherever you are in the world, if you call Australia home, you can stay in touch with the Air News app. Download it now for news on the go. This is Air News.
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 Australian Independent Radio News.
Hey, Stephen Grant. This is Brian.
And this is your main man, Micah. Some of your listeners may know us from the Airplane Geeks, but Brian and I are doing another podcast together.
We have a podcast called The Journey is the Reward.
And it's a .org podcast, so don't go looking up some of those .com websites.
Yes, the silly .orgs. In The Journey is the Reward, we talk about travel experiences, tips and tricks, conversations with subject matter experts, and a whole bunch of other stuff.
We have a lot of fun.
So if you'd like to listen to a podcast that focuses on aviation from a travel perspective,
give us a listen, because you never know what you're going to hear.
Well, folks, there's been some news in the recent times about some high-altitude balloons lurking over the United States of America. And for those of you who may have been watching just recently during Autonomous Warrior held off Jarvis Bay, there was a high-altitude balloon being used as a sensor during that exercise. So, of course, I'm into hot air balloons, which are very low level compared to what we're about to talk about, which is gas-filled high-altitude balloons and how they can stay in one point, how they're used for sensors. It's really quite amazing. So we've gone right to the source. We've got Robert Brand on, and Robert is Chief Technology Officer and main man behind Flight Design, who are throwing high-altitude balloons way up there over 55,000 feet into the air with amazing platforms. Robert, welcome to the show.
Pleased to be here. So basically, yes, we get those balloons up to about 120,000 feet, beyond a third of the way to space.
Robert, I quipped recently in a radio interview that actually I was doing with Grant where we were talking about all things technology and defence and that type of thing about sometimes I wonder whether we have an over-reliance on really high technology and always pushing the envelope. But there seems to me to be something almost beautiful about using what was perhaps a more rudimentary technology and then applying modern techniques to it to make it a bit better and really achieve some high-end results.
We're just working on flight stabilization to make our platforms sort of as steady as a brick. But at the same time, we have to do that using fins, and we have to use reaction wheels and all sorts of things that you'd find in a spacecraft. Well, you wouldn't find fins in a spacecraft, but nonetheless, we are more complicated than a normal satellite. Trying to keep things steady when it's going to bounce around like crazy as it climbs up through the atmosphere.
Which is rather appropriate, Robert, because you got your start way back in the days of Apollo 11, and you also worked on STS-1, the first shuttle mission. So you've come from the space world, but here you are a third of the way to space or more with these high-altitude balloons and the incredible payloads on them. So how do you keep them from going up and just disappearing with the winds?
They'll burst first. They won't disappear. They'll be headed back down. There's no way you can actually get a balloon to float off into space. It needs to have some atmosphere to be able to lift against, basically, if you want to talk about it that way. But it's a case of we need to balance the amount of lift with the size of the balloon, and if we let it go too long, it will explode, and that's the ultimate way of getting your payload back, letting it explode and parachute down. But we prefer to actually release the balloon at a fixed level, and so we have all sorts of computers and GPS systems and the like to be able to do these cut downs and to do them reliably so we can get our payload back without all of the rubbish that a burst balloon will actually scatter across the whole of the payload. And you don't want that because, we're basically up there doing little robotic actions in our payload without much protection because we don't want to carry weight. But we do have to make sure it stays clean. So we tend to want to let the balloon go and burst somewhere else as we plummet to the ground with a drogue shootout. So, basically we tend to want to keep things as clean as possible. And that's been really a key thing in improving our act just in recent times, to make things flow as smoothly as possible to give the payload the best chance of settling down to Earth at a very low rate and not smashing the poor payload that we are testing.
Well, are you able to get the balloon up into the upper atmosphere and then you were saying get it up and then let the balloon go and do what it's got to do while the payload comes back under a chute? But could you keep a payload up there under the balloon at a certain altitude or band of altitudes for days, weeks, that kind of thing?
Not using weather balloons because they only last a day. The UV gets to them. And latex, it just isn't good stuff for UV. If we go to Mylar and all of the other types of systems that are available to us, they can stay up for 6 months, and some of the really refined stuff can stay up for a couple of years. Google Loon, which of course was cancelled because it used altitude to try and get to where it needed to go, and that wasn't as reliable as necessary. It was able to stay up for well over 6 months at a time, and they'd bring it down and put a new balloon on and send it back up again. So we know that we have some challenges ahead for long duration, but we could easily stay up for 24 hours without a problem.
Well, you talk about going up to high altitude, and of course people, I suppose, when they think about our atmosphere, might think of things such as the stratosphere, but I see on your website you're looking to travel in an area called the tropopause. Could you explain to our listeners what that part of the atmosphere is?
Yeah, it's the divide between the stratosphere and the troposphere. Now, we live in the troposphere. I mean, right down to the ground. That's all the weather we see is part of that, as is the jet stream. And the jet stream could be running at hundreds of kilometres an hour. If you're coming from Perth or to Perth, it could affect how long you're in the air for dramatically. But as far as we're concerned, we don't like those days, because 1 hour in the air in the jet stream and we'll be hundreds of kilometres away from where we want to be. So we do prefer, if we can, get to where they land in an easy way and appropriately have someone there to catch the damn thing almost. We haven't actually caught it yet, but we're very close to doing it at times. But we're there to watch it land. And, of course, part of that is making sure that the payloads that we fly that belong to universities and defence are captured by us and not by some foreign power that wants to send out, at least some amateurs that want to try and get to it before we do. Not that they could use what is on there, they wouldn't have a clue what it was. But we do run a whole range of sensors that are able to detect all sorts of crazy things. And we're just looking at working with some sensors. One that our team is building, which is basically hyperspectral sensor, and another sensor that we could be working on soon would be a quantum magnetometer. And, these sorts of things in the quantum world are not impossible to work with. We'd be working with a university, and it's quite crazy, the sorts of small nature of some of these things and the low power. So we can actually put these things on balloons and power them and get them up there. And we tend to do that mass-wise for including all of our parachutes and our computers for under 4 kilograms, or if we have to, under 6 kilograms, which is the next size up for balloon flight, medium balloons. But we do try to use light balloons.
Are you doing much work with the Mylar balloons that stick around for a while and you go up and down, and by, I believe, changing the gas in the actual envelope bring it back into a container so you can go up and down and ride the waves, the air bands, and stay in roughly the right area?
It's well-known technology. We know what we want to do when we do get into that, but we aren't a big company with a ton of money. Now, we would need the help of a grant or whatever to move into this part of the world. So we tend to prove that we have the capability using just the latex balloons that only last a day. And that then allows us to say, look, this works. You want to see it work longer, you come up with some cash to actually do that. But we know that the rest of the world is using primarily, I guess, playing around with the amount of lift, the gas, and compressing it so that it's heavier, and thus it comes down, and then expanding it to take it back up. Well, that allows you some rough control over positioning, and you might be able to get 50 kilometres to 100 kilometres rough positioning, but we are working on using propulsion and all sorts of interesting gadgets that we've designed to keep the centre of gravity where it should be, so that we can fly these things and keep them in a very tight slot and capable of being used almost like an antenna in the sky that is very stationary. The beauty of that, of course, is you can point other antennas at it and know it's there.
So like a comms relay in case of an emergency situation, and I guess if you're using sensors for vision, or as you mentioned, magnetometers and so on, it's a persistent stare in one area. Hypothetical battlegrounds, emergencies.
Yes, we could say go above a cyclone before the cyclone even hits and provide comms during the time when everything on the ground's getting destroyed, including the base stations and that all the different groups use. And we would still be able to provide comms in that spot. Because we can basically ride up. The tropopause sits around about 18 kilometres up, and it's outside of controlled airspace, luckily, just outside, so we can sit up there and we can motor around. We hope to be able to motor around about 700 kilometres a day, and that allows us to launch it, say, from down here and then over a week, send it up north to northern Queensland to sit out a cyclone or something. All of these things are quite on the cards for what we've got in store. And we're doing testing all the time, and we're just engaging right now with the groups. We deal with CASA Sports. Believe it or not, we have to deal with sports to put a balloon up, which has nothing to do with sports. And then we have to deal with the RPAS people for winged flight that we also wish to be involved in at very high altitudes. And that allows us then to be able to have new rules that we can fly under, because currently there's no room in Australia for experimentation. Because if you want to do, say, a winged flight, CASA gets you to actually prove to them you can fly what you're going to fly, and then you're licensed to fly that one machine. But if you want to build 10 different machines to find out which one's the best, that's a lot of testing, a lot of money to pay CASA to have them come out and authorise you to fly a certain machine that's never been flown before.
So you're talking there about a lot of interesting applications, I guess, in the civilian world. Do you think your perhaps focus for this sort of technology would be more at a civilian type applications like this, or do you think there's equally a great market there in the defence side of it?
Well, there's a lot of work to be done on the civilian side, say putting up 3 balloons that could monitor a fire automatically using AI. So they would work out where the best position to put each of the 3 balloons so as to give the people on the ground the best view of the fire. That's quite possible. So AI comes into it. And of course, we're not talking AI like the ones that we talk to on the internet and say, search for this. This is not what it's about. AI is all about having the intelligence to be able to complete things to make life easier, and even if it's to find a good position to view a fire, so that it can use all of its what it sees currently and the weather around it and so on to be able to do what it needs to do and still be under the control of the people on the ground. So we are looking at having all of those capabilities and be able to have twin seat capability for pilots to be able to reposition the thing, very much like you see in almost every drone type situation on the ground with pilots. We need to do exactly the same thing, whether it be balloons with propulsion or balloons without propulsion. We see a lot of applications where we won't need that. But can you imagine a line of balloons out across the ocean, each being able to listen for jet engines, be able to sense the flux changes of aircraft flying underneath them and so on? We would have a line of defence that would tell us that an otherwise invisible attack is coming our way, where our radar will not see them. And we would be able to provide a lot of stuff for defence and give us advance warning that something's on the way to attack us and get our aircraft in the sky. So these sorts of opportunities are out there, and the sensor technology for it is still being developed. There's a lot of single sensors being tested right now, but the trick is to actually have some duality or more in the number of sensors on board these type of line of defence, which allow us to verify what we're seeing. So it's one thing to hear a jet engine that we think is a fighter, but then to be able to sense that, hey, we just saw some flux changes, something just blew underneath us about 20 seconds ago, and this verifies it from the sound, and then maybe we verify it with neuromorphic cameras and all sorts of things. There's a whole range of sensors out there in the marketplace that are very capable of being used to really provide protection. But the ability to hold those sensors in place in a line is really quite important to defence.
And I would imagine that would be far more cost effective too than, say, for example, relying on putting something up into space and, having a satellite set over. This would be a much more cost effective way of doing that.
Well, we just saw the cancellation of one very big satellite That was more a case of putting all your eggs in one basket. You really just need to send up a signal to jam it, and you're gone. Even satellites in low Earth orbit are open to jamming, but the closer you can get to the landmass, the less likely you are to have people jamming your technology, and that's why we expect that we'd be able to provide a comfortable array of craft being able to provide the comms between them, and to be reliable in the fact that, if someone does take out one or two of them, we are able to get the signal through to the end site anyway. So it's not just a single point-to-point network. It's able to share data and so on, very much like the internet, but an intranet for the Department of Defence. And these are really important things to be able to deploy in short order, because you don't necessarily want them up there all the time. When things suddenly happen, you want to be able to get them up in 24 hours, say, and start to provide that comfortable network and comms that are essential in warfare.
That's agility, isn't it? I mean, that's critical.
Yes, simple yes.
Yeah, because that's the thing with the JP9102 and all your eggs in one basket, as you said. Somebody, not just a signal from on the ground, there's satellites up there that come along and say hi and take you out. There's all sorts of stuff there. And if you've got a LEO constellation like Starlink or some of the other ones that are being planned and put together, they can also be disrupted using similar methods. And if you do take out a satellite, you've got to be able to get something built and put up there really quickly. But in the interim, for much cheaper and much faster, you can use a high-altitude balloon to get that package into the area while a new satellite's being put together and put up there.
Especially if we can do it in a way that allows us to, I guess, launch them all from a couple of common sites and then spread them out. They can motor their way to where they've got to go. You don't have to launch them below where you want them.
Yeah, or upwind as we do at the moment.
Of course, there's something worse that could happen, and rather than an attack coming, we could have just that critical mass with Kessler effect, which will take out our satellites just because we put too many up, and junk then destroys other things that creates junk that destroys more, and then space is worthless. And we see that we are going to be a very important future way of communications until space becomes useful again for hundreds of years, possibly. And we have the point is, if you were our enemy and you suddenly saw our networks all just disappear in the space sector, it might be a time to attack us. We just see that opportunities may be created, and we want to be ready to counter them.
Yep, and it's as you said, the Kessler syndrome. You've got the Carrington event, which was a coronal mass ejection, solar flare, all those combined, and that was taking great aurora, like we've recently seen, but it took out a lot of electronic gear on the ground. If something like that were to happen and take out more satellites or make it difficult to communicate with them, so there's a lot of things that make space-based systems. Yeah, they're great, but there's so many ways you can block them.
It's important to realize that the way we're going to use things like balloons just hasn't been thought of yet. And we keep coming up with new ideas all the time, and it's just a matter of having innovation at the heart of what you're doing. And that's actually my title. I'm the innovation manager. R&D, sure, but I'm also the innovation manager, so that we can actually build these things. And as we create new and interesting ways of controlling them and technology for launching them, and you name it, we are looking at the new opportunities that just come out of the blue. And one of them was we just had a call for a couple of weeks ago from a university that just said, we're developing this new technology, and it's going to revolutionize mining, health, and defense. And that's a case of, hey, that's fine. We want to be in that. So we want to be part of the business that helps design these systems for flight, because that will be part of how these things work, and they will work with AI, and they'll do all sorts of things. So these are really important things. I just can't emphasize it enough. I'll keep saying it, but we see things that haven't happened. Now, that Chinese balloon that they shot down, I mean, has anyone heard from the results of what they found? I can't seem to find anything. It's just gone quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But my belief was it was just listening for comms. And my belief was that it was looking at the density of the communications between various places, because they probably couldn't decode it. But they would be able to learn a hell of a lot just by how much comms is going between 2 sites and 3 sites and so on. And that's about all they could learn, other than taking pictures of them from above. And they would have been relayed back in real time.
Yep, and watching the response rates, seeing what happens as it came over an area, gathering a lake of data that, can't decrypt today, but they might be able to tomorrow. All those kind of things are big parts of the SIGINT. Yep.
Definitely. But, pictures, with compression, we're seeing huge amounts of data. A single picture of, 25 megapixels able to be transmitted very quickly somewhere, not all day, doing a single picture via satellite. The encryption and then expansion of those pictures can be very fast these days, and unbelievably so, all with the help of AI. And we're seeing just things you would not believe out there. I can't tell you about them because they're our customers' products that we're testing, and you know who that customer is. We're now seeing universities now flying with us, and that's because every university pretty much has a lab that has defence written on it, and they want to test things before they then get defence to test them. So exciting times that I live in. When you go back and have a look at when I grew up, the only technology sitting in my house was an old valve record player and a radio. And there was a single PowerPoint. I lived in a house in Paddington that was built in the 1800s. And those sorts of things, you just look at the amount of work that's gone into it. And of course, strangely enough, even at my tender age, I'm able to stay at the forefront of all of this technology. And that's exciting for me because, hell, I get to play with big boys' toys, which is always one of the exciting things about defence.
It's certainly about intelligence gathering and information gathering. I notice, Robert, on your website too, it's not only about balloons, or perhaps this works in partnership. You can tell us. I see you have an ISR drone project. Now, looking at the picture here, the first thing I thought is there's not a lot of control surfaces on here, and then I read a bit about that as I go down, and it talks about fluidic propulsion. Can you explain to me what that is? Because it sounds fascinating.
Ever stood in front of a Dyson fan with no blades that you can see? And that is the basis of fluidic propulsion, because air moves as a fluid under the right circumstances. And we could provide, there's a few test drones out there that are using fluidic propulsion, but the efficiencies are just phenomenal. I mean, efficiencies with the Dyson fan, 15 times the efficiency of a fan with a blade. 15 times. So you can imagine that we've only got a small amount of sunlight available to us because we can't carry much in the way of the panels. Of course, we don't use panels. We use something very thin and fine and virtually weightless, but we do have to be careful. And we need to get as much oomph out of that electricity as we can. So fluidic propulsion allows us to do that, but it also allows another interesting aspect of it all, and that is we could fly without any control surfaces whatsoever. And by running air in different speeds across different parts of wings and other what would be control surfaces. And it's the pressure differentials that create the movement in the aircraft. But we don't want to do that because should your fluidic propulsion fail, you don't want to have an aircraft that's uncontrollable. You still want to be able to glide back down to safety. But you could lock those surfaces so they're not causing a problem on the aircraft until you need to use them. Because if you end up getting close to its maximum speed, you get shake in the control surfaces. And if you really want to go fast, you get a lot of shake. And we have been designing since very early days a supersonic glider. We've never flown it because no one wants to give us the money to be able to fly it. But when we did an interview for working with the Department of Defence, when my son was 15, I took him to the meeting along with all the senior people, and we had a question from DSTG, the technical group that the Air Force had brought along, and they said, yeah, that's not going to work. It's going to flip itself out and suddenly destroy itself, and how are you going to stop it from doing that? And I got my 15-year-old son to speak to them and explain exactly how we were doing it so that that would never happen. And they just looked at each other after being taught a lesson by a 15-year-old, and they just said, oh, that'll probably work. So we have some expertise in a lot of areas of this that actually, we know that the Air Force have never really looked at some of this stuff because they're not paid to. They use groups like us to go and sort that out. And if it's not on their list of what needs to be ticked that year or that month, they don't even look at it. You have to go to them. We do have a product coming up, which they also have asked us to fly. And we're doing our first test this week, which is a camera with pan, tilt, zoom type stability and even AI for targeting. And we're going to be flying that. And we have a capability of probably bringing back high quality imaging from maybe even up to 150 kilometres away. And it's you'll be able to fly this over enemy territory and lock on to a tank or something and follow the tank around and provide targeting information on that tank during the whole time that we're watching it. And that's what the AI does. It works all that out and keeps track. But, these tests are going to be seeing these balloons do things that, $100 million drones do. And that's going to be an eye-opener because we will be circulating that around the Defence Force with a big, like a Zoom meeting or whatever. And they'll be seeing firsthand what this is capable of doing. And then we'll be flying some of their bigger cameras around. But for the moment, it'll be the whole payload will be under 4 kilograms.
It's an amazing company and certainly an amazing technology that you're developing here. Obviously something that's become a life's passion for you, and I guess something that in some ways has become, would it be fair to say, a bit of a family tradition?
Well, this all started when I took my 9-year-old son out to do a balloon flight and fly it up there with a camera and tracker and recover it. And we've built a company that is really top rate in the world out of that first project. And I can't tell you how important it is to get your kids involved in the sort of technology, lots of different types. Now, sure, he's followed what I like to do, and that's fine, but my other kids haven't, and they've all been exposed to a lot of different technologies and work and everything, and they're all doing really well at their different jobs. But this one has been quite interesting for me as a father and as part of the team to be able to do this. And I really can't tell you how important it is to sort of get this sort of innovation going in your kids and what might come out of it. And he's won major awards in the defence industry for innovation, and he won them at 19 on a national level, and people normally win that one on when they're in their late 20s. So he was the youngest ever to win it. And, this is because it's it's an area that is not explored much. So it gives great opportunity. But balloons, you think of them as nothing much, but they are an amazing concept to move forward with in defence.
Well, Robert, I think that's a really good spot to end this discussion on. Thank you very much for talking to us about high-altitude balloons. Congrats for everything you've done to date, and I'm looking forward to keeping in touch and hearing more in the coming years of what your company's up to way up there in the troposphere.
And you'll definitely hear about that. We'll be undetectable up there. No heat, no radio except up to satellites. And no metal work up there other than the bits of electronics. And so we are the invisible watching machine, unlike the big metal drones. So, it'll be a fun time. And thanks, guys, for this opportunity. As much as you need to have it for covering off all of your bases in defence, we need it too, because we need to have people understand what is out there, how they can test stuff that's destined for space.
And thanks to Robert Brown there. I tell you what, that is amazing stuff, Grant. How much of this technology can you mate up? It's like taking what potentially was, I tried to get this point across. I don't know whether I made it properly. I hope I didn't upset Robert too much. But the whole point was that, we're looking at something that is high-tech but has us not low tech.
It feels old school.
It does. It feels old school. Yeah, it's interesting the way that they blended those two sort of concepts together. I think that's amazing.
Well, to quote the editor of Australian Defence Magazine, good friend Nigel Pittaway, balloons. It always comes back to balloons with you, doesn't it?
It does. Anyway, so some fantastic stuff there, and I tell you what, a lot of very, very smart people. It just goes to show you that here in Australia, sometimes there's a lot of doom and gloom that goes on around all sorts of manufacturing sectors and just life in general these days. But when you listen to people like this talking, it does give you some heart that there are some really, really intelligent people doing some amazing things right here in Australia.
Absolutely. And it was really good to catch up with both the younger side and Robert's side. He's been in the business for a long time. We've got representations from rockets to high altitude gas balloons, and we got the young and we've got the not so young. So it's quite the range, shall we say.
Now, like I say, we're recording this in January of 2025. As we mentioned at the start of the show, there's a lot of interesting things coming up this year. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear some things, some ideas. We talked at the start of the show, maybe we might talk to some politicians coming into the election. Contact at playingcrazydownunder.com is where you can get a hold of us, and we'd love to hear from you, people who have been contacting us, particularly since we started this second series of the show, which actually is coming up in 2 years ago now. We'd love to hear from you and just find out about stories around. Everybody's got a great story to tell, and we'd certainly love, we've picked up so many great story ideas over the years, Grant, from our listeners, people who are in all parts of Australia and say, hey, what about this story and what about this person? And that's where we get a lot of our story ideas from. So please do that. Contact at playingcrazydownunder.com.
It would be great to hear from you.
Now, just before we wrap up, Grant, over the years, it's always been encouraging to see the way things have developed in this space. And, in the time that between when we sort of shut down operations here at PCDU and ramped it back up again, that little sort of 4 or 5 year gap, there have been so many more great content creators that have popped up, particularly in the aviation space. There's just some amazing content, I think, of things like the Fighter Pilot podcast, and shows of that genre are just amazing. But a local producer here who's had a pretty rough time lately, and I know we've mentioned him before, is Stefan Drury. And, Stefan's been putting some really heartfelt videos out. I know that Stefan listens to the show. Mate, just wanted to send our best wishes to you. I hope 2025 is all on the up and up. I really admire your positivity in the face of some really challenging, health issues that you've had and are on the way to defeating. So I see actually, Grant, now Stefan looks like he's stepping into the role of doing travel vlogs. And I know he's done those before, but now he's doing the airline reviews, a bit like Noel Phillips does on his channel, if you like that one too. So good on you, Stefan. I hope you're doing well, mate.
Yeah, on you, Steph, and hopefully we get to run into each other again at Moorabbin as we've done in the past.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll do another video of standing in front of your plane while we're trying not to steal it. Who knows?
Yeah, well, we did have the key. Well, okay, it was a Cirrus key. Okay, relax, Steph, relax. It wasn't your Cirrus key.
Yes, as far as you know, it wasn't, mate, anyway.
Shh, dude.
Have you seen that logbook entry I've got? Anyway, we won't talk about that. And Grant, one more thing just before we go. Of course, there are some other places you can find us. You can find me on my website, which is clearsignal.com.au, the radio show from 2024. I'm actually thinking that I might just make that a podcast from here. I haven't really decided 100% yet, but I have been remanufacturing all of those into podcast editions. So if you go to clearsignal.com.au, hit the podcast tab, and please subscribe. I need followers. I need attention. I like to be famous. But that's basically a show where we talk about all sorts of things. In fact, I might have even snuck Grant onto that podcast, Grant. But speaking of podcasts that you're a part of.
Yeah. You were very desperate when you needed me that day, but anyhow.
It was a good chat. Come on.
Yeah, I know. It was very fun chat. And it was all about the topic that I'm going to talk about now, which is Australian Defence. As mentioned, I am working with Australian Defence Magazine, hosting their podcast and doing some more stuff with them now and writing articles as well. So you can find more of me on australiandefence.com.au. There's a tab for podcasts, so you can subscribe there and hear my dulcet tones there, talking about matters of interest to Australia, defence, industry, that kind of environment. But lots of very interesting stuff. There's a lot of topics and discussions that would be of interest to anyone in the world. And on that site you can also find some of my articles as they pop up. Just do a search for McCarran, and in amongst the podcasts you'll find them.
Absolutely. And of course, if you're looking to have a podcast made, we actually run quite a busy business doing that these days. We do a lot of other titles for our friends at Yaffa Media and some other clients as well. So if you need some ideas on how to make a podcast, or if you just you'd like someone to do it for you, then certainly drop us a line. We're happy to help you out. All right, that's enough business plugs, I think, Grant. I think we should probably wind it up there. Until we speak to you next time, folks, Steve Fisher on behalf of Grant McHerron, wishing you all some very safe flying, folks, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Find show notes for this episode along with our contact details and a full back catalogue of shows at planecrazydownunder.com. Drop us a line anytime with feedback, story suggestions or advertising inquiries. We'd love to hear from you. Title music is You Name It by Brian Simpson. Plane Crazy Down Under is a Southern Skies media production.
Southern Skies Media.